Sarah Martinez walked through the bustling corridors of Henderson Manufacturing Company with her head held high, despite the whispers that followed her everywhere. At 28, she had worked at the factory for 3 years, starting as a floor supervisor and gradually earning respect through her dedication and keen eye for detail. But today felt different. Today, the atmosphere seemed more hostile than usual. "There goes our diversity hire," sneered Marcus Webb, the production manager, loud enough for Sarah to hear. His comment drew chuckles from the group of supervisors gathered around the coffee machine. "Wonder what brilliant idea she'll come up with today to slow us down." Sarah's jaw tightened, but she continued walking. She had heard variations of this comment countless times since joining the company. Being one of the few women in a male-dominated manufacturing environment wasn't easy, especially when some of her colleagues seemed determined to undermine her at every turn. The Henderson Manufacturing Company specialized in precision automotive parts, supplying major car manufacturers across the country. The work was demanding, requiring attention to detail and strong leadership skills to manage the production teams. Sarah excelled at both, but her success only seemed to fuel the resentment of certain colleagues who felt threatened by her competence. As she reached her office, a small, glass-walled space overlooking the production floor, Sarah noticed her assistant Jenny waiting with a stack of reports. Jenny was barely 22, fresh out of college, and had quickly become one of Sarah's most trusted allies in the company. "Morning, Sarah," Jenny said, offering a sympathetic smile. "I heard what Marcus said. Don't let him get to you." Sarah hung her jacket on the back of her chair and sat down, taking a deep breath. "I've dealt with worse, Jenny. What do we have today?" "The quarterly efficiency reports are in, and there's something interesting you need to see." Jenny placed the reports on Sarah's desk, her expression becoming more serious. "Your department has the highest productivity scores in the entire company again. 3rd quarter in a row." Sarah picked up the reports, scanning the numbers with practiced efficiency. Her department, which handled the final quality control and packaging of automotive sensors, had indeed outperformed every other division. Not only were they meeting all deadlines, but they had also reduced waste by 15% and improved product quality ratings significantly. "This should be good news," Sarah murmured, but she knew it wouldn't be received that way by everyone. Success often bred jealousy, especially when it came from someone they considered an outsider. Throughout the morning, Sarah moved between the production floor and her office, checking on her team's progress and addressing any issues that arose. Her approach was hands-on but respectful. Unlike some managers who ruled through fear and intimidation, Sarah believed in empowering her workers and listening to their suggestions. Around noon, the monthly management meeting was scheduled. Sarah gathered her reports and headed to the conference room, knowing she would face the usual mix of professional discussion and subtle undermining from certain colleagues. The conference room was filled with the company's senior staff. At the head of the table sat Robert Henderson, the company owner, a stern man in his 60s, who had built the business from nothing over the past 30 years. To his right was Vice President Tom Bradley, a smooth-talking executive who had joined the company 5 years earlier. The rest of the table was occupied by various department heads, including Marcus Webb. "Let's start with the quarterly reports," Henderson announced, his voice commanding immediate attention. "I want to hear from each department head about their performance and any challenges they're facing." One by one, the managers presented their reports. Most departments showed steady performance with minor improvements here and there. When it was Marcus's turn, he stood up with his usual swagger. "Production has been solid," Marcus began, "though we've had some challenges coordinating with quality control. Some of the new procedures have been slowing us down, creating unnecessary bottlenecks." Sarah felt her stomach clench. She knew exactly what Marcus was implying, though he was being careful not to mention her by name in front of Henderson. When her turn came, Sarah stood up calmly. "Quality control and packaging has exceeded targets for the 3rd consecutive quarter. We've improved efficiency by 12% while reducing defects by 18%. Our customer satisfaction scores are at an all-time high." The room fell silent. The numbers were impressive, and everyone knew it. "How did you achieve these improvements?" Henderson asked, leaning forward with genuine interest. Sarah had prepared for this question. "We implemented a team-based feedback system where workers can suggest improvements directly. We also reorganized the workflow to eliminate redundant steps and invested in additional training for our staff. Interesting, Henderson nodded. And what about these coordination issues Marcus mentioned? Sarah looked directly at Marcus before responding. We haven't experienced any significant coordination problems. In fact, our communication with production has improved significantly. We've been able to identify potential issues earlier in the process, which actually saves time and reduces waste. Marcus's face reddened slightly. Well, that's not how I see it. Your department's obsession with perfectionism is causing delays. Can you provide specific examples? Sarah asked calmly. Marcus fumbled for a moment before Tom Bradley intervened. I think we're getting off track here. The important thing is that all departments are performing well overall. But Henderson wasn't satisfied. No, I want to understand this. Sarah, you're saying your department is exceeding targets while Marcus is claiming you're causing delays. These can't both be true. The tension in the room was palpable. Sarah knew this was a crucial moment. Mr. Henderson, I'd be happy to provide detailed documentation of our processes and timelines. I believe you'll find that any perceived delays actually result in better quality products and fewer returns from customers. I'd like to see those reports, Henderson said firmly. Have them on my desk by tomorrow morning. As the meeting continued with other business, Sarah could feel the hostile glares from Marcus and a few of his allies. She had just called them out in front of the owner, and she knew there would be consequences. After the meeting ended, Sarah was gathering her papers when Tom Bradley approached her. Sarah, a word of advice, he said quietly, his tone condescending. Sometimes it's better to be part of the team rather than trying to stand out. You're making enemies with this attitude. Sarah looked at him directly. I'm not trying to stand out, Tom. I'm trying to do my job well. If that makes some people uncomfortable, that's their problem, not mine. Tom's smile was cold. Just be careful. Henderson won't always be around to protect you. As Sarah walked back to her office, she reflected on Tom's words. She knew he was right about one thing. She was making enemies. But she also knew she was doing excellent work, and her team respected her for it. The question was whether that would be enough to survive in this environment. That afternoon, Sarah spent time on the production floor with her team. Unlike the tense atmosphere of the management meeting, here she felt at home. Her workers, a mix of experienced veterans and younger employees, trusted her judgment and appreciated her leadership style. Hey, Sarah, called out Miguel Reyes, one of her senior technicians. I've been thinking about that suggestion you made last week about reorganizing the sensor testing stations. I think I've figured out a way to make it work even better. Sarah walked over to Miguel's station, genuinely interested in his idea. This was what she loved about her job: the collaborative problem-solving, the constant improvement, the satisfaction of seeing a team work together effectively. Show me what you're thinking, she said, leaning in to look at Miguel's sketches. For the next 20 minutes, Sarah and Miguel discussed his proposal, with several other team members joining the conversation. By the end, they had developed a plan that could potentially improve efficiency by another 8% while making the work easier for the technicians. This is exactly the kind of thinking that makes this department successful, Sarah told the group. Miguel, can you put together a detailed proposal? I'd like to present it to management next week. As the day shift ended and Sarah prepared to leave, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Despite the politics and the hostility from some of her colleagues, she was making a real difference. Her department was proving that treating workers with respect and encouraging innovation led to better results. But as she walked to her car, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that bigger challenges lay ahead. The confrontation in the management meeting had escalated the tensions, and she suspected that Marcus and Tom Bradley wouldn't let things slide. They would be looking for ways to undermine her success and prove their point that she didn't belong. That evening, Sarah sat in her small apartment, working on the detailed reports Henderson had requested. She meticulously documented every process improvement, every efficiency gain, every customer satisfaction metric. The numbers told a clear story of success. But Sarah knew that numbers weren't always enough, in a world where perception and politics often mattered more than performance. As she worked late into the night, Sarah thought about her journey to this point. She had grown up in a working-class family, where hard work and integrity were valued above all else. Her father had been a factory worker himself, and he had always told her that if she did good work and treated people fairly, success would follow. But the corporate world was proving to be more complicated than her father's simple wisdom had suggested. Good work wasn't always recognized, and fair treatment didn't always lead to fair treatment in return. Still, Sarah was determined to stay true to her principles. She believed that excellence would ultimately win out, even if the path was more difficult than she had expected. Little did Sarah know that her biggest test was yet to come, and that the medal she wore close to her heart, a reminder of a heroic act from her past that she had never spoken about at work, would soon play a crucial role in changing how everyone at Henderson Manufacturing saw her. The colleagues who laughed at her and called her useless had no idea that they were dealing with someone whose courage and character had already been proven in ways they could never imagine. The stage was set for a confrontation that would reveal the true character of everyone involved and ultimately transform not just Sarah's position at the company, but the entire culture of Henderson Manufacturing. The next morning arrived with an unexpected crisis that would test Sarah Martinez in ways she had never anticipated. She arrived at Henderson Manufacturing at her usual time, 7:30 in the morning, only to find her assistant Jenny waiting outside her office with a worried expression. "Sarah, we have a serious problem," Jenny said, her voice tight with concern. "There's been an issue with the overnight production run. Marcus is already in Mr. Henderson's office, and he's not happy." Sarah's heart sank, but she maintained her composure. "What kind of issue?" 300 automotive sensors failed quality control. "They're saying it's our fault, that our new testing procedures are flawed. Marcus is claiming that your changes to the workflow caused the defects." Sarah immediately knew something wasn't right. The procedures they had implemented were based on industry best practices and had been working flawlessly for months. "Have you seen the actual defective units?" "No." Marcus sealed them in his office. "He's saying they need to be examined by an outside inspector to determine the cause." This raised immediate red flags for Sarah. Standard procedure would be to examine the defects immediately with the quality control team present. Sealing them away suggested something suspicious was happening. "Get me the production logs from last night," Sarah instructed. "I want to see exactly what happened during that run." While Jenny retrieved the logs, Sarah went to examine the production line where the sensors had been manufactured. Everything appeared normal, but as she looked more closely, she noticed something odd. The calibration settings on 2 of the testing machines had been changed from their standard configurations. "That's strange," she muttered to herself, checking the machine logs. According to the digital records, the changes had been made at 11:15 the previous night, long after her day shift team had gone home. Only supervisors and senior technicians had access codes to make such changes. Jenny returned with the production logs, and together they reviewed the timeline of events. The pattern that emerged was troubling. The calibration changes had been made by someone with a supervisor access code, but there was no record of any authorized maintenance or adjustment scheduled for that time. "Jenny, I need you to check who was in the building last night after hours. Pull the security card logs." As Jenny went to get the security information, Sarah continued her investigation. She examined each testing station carefully, looking for any other signs of tampering. What she found confirmed her suspicions. Someone had deliberately altered the equipment to cause the defects. Before she could complete her investigation, Tom Bradley appeared at her station. "Sarah, Mr. Henderson wants to see you immediately," he said, his tone formal but with an undertone of satisfaction. "This is a serious situation." Sarah followed Tom to Henderson's office, her mind racing through the implications of what she had discovered. She knew this was a setup, but proving it would require more evidence than she currently had. Henderson's office was crowded. Besides Henderson himself, Marcus Webb was there, along with Tom Bradley and the company's head of operations, Frank Morrison. The atmosphere was tense, and Sarah could immediately tell that the conversation had not been going well for her department. "Sarah, we have a major problem," Henderson began without preamble. 300 units failed quality control last night. Marcus tells me this is directly related to the procedural changes you implemented. Our customer is threatening to cancel their contract. Sarah took a deep breath before responding. "Mr. Henderson, I've begun a preliminary investigation, and I believe the failures were not caused by our procedures. In fact, I have reason to believe the testing equipment was deliberately tampered with." The room fell silent. Marcus's face turned red with apparent indignation. "That's a serious accusation," Henderson said slowly. "Do you have proof?" "I'm gathering evidence now. The calibration settings on 2 testing machines were altered at 11:15 last night, well after my team had left. Someone with supervisor access made unauthorized changes that would directly cause the type of failures we saw." Marcus jumped to his feet. "This is ridiculous. Now she's making wild accusations instead of taking responsibility for her mistakes. This is exactly the kind of behavior that's been causing problems in her department." "If you'll allow me to complete my investigation," Sarah said calmly, "I believe I can provide definitive proof of what happened." Tom Bradley leaned forward. "Sarah, I think you're grasping at straws here. Sometimes the simplest explanation is the correct one. Your procedures caused defects and now you're trying to blame others." Henderson looked between Sarah and Marcus, clearly trying to process the conflicting information. "Marcus, were you in the building last night?" "I was here until about 9 o'clock finishing some paperwork, but I was nowhere near the quality control area." Sarah knew this was her moment to present what evidence she had. "Mr. Henderson, I'd like permission to examine those sealed defective units immediately. I also want to review the complete security footage from last night and check all card access logs." Henderson considered this for a moment. "Fine. But if this investigation doesn't support your claims, I'll have to seriously reconsider your position here." The investigation took most of the morning. Sarah, accompanied by Frank Morrison as a neutral observer, examined the sealed units while Henderson reviewed the security footage and access logs with the head of security. What they found painted a clear picture of sabotage. The defective units showed failures consistent with the calibration changes Sarah had discovered. More importantly, the security footage revealed Marcus Webb returning to the building at 10:45 the previous night, despite his claim that he had left at 9 o'clock. The card access logs confirmed that Marcus had used his supervisor code to enter the quality control area at 11:10, just minutes before the calibration changes were recorded. When Henderson confronted Marcus with this evidence, the production manager's composure cracked. "Okay, I was there," Marcus admitted, "but I was just checking on things. Maybe I accidentally bumped into the machines or something." "Marcus," Henderson's voice was ice cold. "The calibration changes were deliberate and specific. They required multiple menu selections and password confirmations. You didn't accidentally bump into anything." Faced with overwhelming evidence, Marcus finally broke down and admitted to sabotaging the equipment. His motivation was exactly what Sarah had suspected: jealousy and resentment over her success and the attention she was receiving from management. "She doesn't belong here," Marcus said desperately. "She's not one of us. She's just some college girl who thinks she knows better than people who've been doing this job for decades." Henderson's response was swift and decisive. Marcus was terminated immediately, escorted from the building by security. But the damage had already been done. The customer relationship was strained, the company's reputation was at risk, and the entire incident had created an atmosphere of distrust and division among the staff. As news of Marcus's sabotage spread through the company, reactions were mixed. Some employees expressed support for Sarah and outrage at Marcus's actions. Others, particularly those who had been loyal to Marcus, viewed the situation with suspicion and continued to harbor resentment toward Sarah. "This isn't over," one of Marcus's allies, Supervisor Pete Collins, muttered to a group of workers during lunch break. "She's still the problem. Marcus just got caught trying to expose the truth about her." The whispers and hostile looks continued, and in some ways became worse. Now Sarah wasn't just the target of professional jealousy. She was seen by some as someone who had cost a popular colleague his job. Tom Bradley, while forced to publicly support the investigation's findings, privately continued to undermine Sarah's position. In meetings, he would make subtle comments about the unfortunate situation and the need to restore trust and stability to the department. "Perhaps," he suggested to Henderson during one executive meeting, "we should consider bringing in an outside manager to oversee quality control for a while, just until things settle down." Sarah knew she was fighting an uphill battle. Despite being vindicated by the investigation, she was still viewed with suspicion by a significant portion of the workforce. The stress was taking its toll, but she refused to be driven out by bullying and sabotage. During this difficult period, Sarah found support from unexpected sources. Miguel Reyes and several other senior technicians publicly defended her leadership, sharing stories of how her management style had improved their work experience and job satisfaction. "Before Sarah came here, we were just numbers," Miguel told a group of skeptical workers. "She listens to our ideas and treats us like people. The production numbers don't lie. We're doing better work now than we ever have." Jenny, her assistant, also proved to be a fierce ally. Despite being young and new to the corporate environment, she had developed strong loyalty to Sarah and wasn't afraid to speak up when she heard unfair criticism. "I've worked with Sarah every day for 2 years," Jenny told anyone who would listen. "She's the most honest, hardworking person I've ever met. The idea that she would do anything dishonest is ridiculous." But perhaps the most significant support came from an unexpected source. Some of Henderson's biggest customers. Word of the sabotage incident had spread, and several major automotive manufacturers reached out to express their confidence in Sarah's department and their satisfaction with the quality improvements they had seen. One customer, Davidson Automotive, sent a formal letter praising Sarah's team for their exceptional work and specifically requesting that she continue to oversee their account. This external validation carried significant weight with Henderson, who was ultimately more concerned about customer satisfaction than internal politics. Despite these positives, Sarah knew her position remained precarious. Tom Bradley was actively working to undermine her, and there was still a faction of employees who blamed her for the disruption to their workplace culture. The situation came to a head during a company-wide meeting called to address the recent events and chart a path forward. Henderson had decided to directly confront the rumors and division that were affecting productivity and morale. "I want to be clear about something," Henderson announced to the assembled employees. "The investigation into last week's incident was thorough and conclusive. Marcus Webb deliberately sabotaged equipment to make it appear that our quality control procedures were flawed. This was an act of professional sabotage that put our customer relationships and company reputation at risk." The room was silent, but Sarah could feel the tension among the employees. Some nodded in agreement, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Henderson continued, "I've been running this company for 30 years, and I've learned to judge people by their results, not by their politics or personal opinions. Sarah Martinez has consistently delivered exceptional results for this company. Her department has the highest efficiency ratings, the best quality scores, and the most satisfied customers." Tom Bradley, sitting in the front row, looked uncomfortable as Henderson's praise for Sarah became more explicit. Furthermore, Henderson added, "Any employee who cannot accept these facts and work professionally with all their colleagues will find their future here very limited. This company succeeds when we work together, not when we waste time and energy on personal conflicts." After the meeting, Sarah felt cautiously optimistic. Henderson had given her his public support, which should help stabilize her position. But she also knew that changing deeply ingrained attitudes would take time, and her enemies would simply become more subtle in their opposition. That evening, as Sarah prepared to leave work, she touched the small medal she always wore beneath her shirt, a reminder of a time when her courage had been tested in ways far more serious than workplace politics. She had never told anyone at Henderson Manufacturing about her military service or the circumstances that had earned her that medal. It was part of a past she preferred to keep private. But as she walked to her car, Sarah couldn't help but think that her colleagues who called her useless and questioned her worthiness had no idea what she had already proven herself capable of. The medal was a constant reminder that she had faced much greater challenges than office politics and had emerged victorious through courage, integrity, and determination. The real test, however, was yet to come. Unknown to Sarah, events were already in motion that would soon bring her past and present together in a way that would forever change how everyone at Henderson Manufacturing viewed her. 3 weeks after the sabotage incident, life at Henderson Manufacturing had settled into an uneasy routine. Sarah Martinez continued to excel in her role, her department maintaining its impressive performance metrics despite the ongoing tension with certain colleagues. The whispers and hostile looks hadn't completely disappeared, but they had become more subdued following Henderson's public support. On a crisp October morning, Sarah arrived at work to find the parking lot busier than usual. Several unfamiliar vehicles were parked near the main entrance, including what appeared to be government sedans. Inside the building, the atmosphere was electric with nervous energy. Jenny was waiting for her with obvious excitement. "Sarah, you won't believe what's happening. There are military officials here. Some kind of inspection or visit." Mr. Henderson called an emergency meeting for all department heads in 20 minutes. Sarah felt a flutter of unease. Military visits to civilian manufacturing facilities were not uncommon, especially for companies that supplied automotive parts that might be used in military vehicles. But something about Jenny's tone suggested this was different. In the conference room, Henderson looked more serious than Sarah had ever seen him. Beside him stood a distinguished man in military uniform, with colonel's insignia on his shoulders. Two other officers flanked him, their expressions formal and official. "I want to introduce Colonel James Mitchell from the Department of Defense," Henderson began. "The colonel has something important to discuss with us." Colonel Mitchell stepped forward, his bearing commanding immediate respect from everyone in the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here because your facility has been selected for a special government contract. We need precision automotive sensors for a critical military application, and your reputation for quality has brought you to our attention." Sarah listened as the colonel outlined the requirements. The contract was substantial, potentially worth millions of dollars over 3 years. But it came with strict security protocols, rigorous quality standards, and accelerated deadlines that would test the company's capabilities. "The sensors must meet military specifications that exceed anything you've produced for civilian customers," Colonel Mitchell explained. "Failure rates must be below 0.1%, and delivery schedules are non-negotiable. This project is classified at a level that requires extensive background checks for all personnel involved." Tom Bradley immediately spoke up, seeing an opportunity to assert his importance. "Colonel, I can assure you that our management team is fully capable of handling this contract. We have extensive experience with high-quality production." The colonel nodded politely but continued his briefing. "We'll need to designate a project manager who will have full authority over this contract. This person must have security clearance and proven experience in managing high-stakes operations under pressure." Sarah noticed that several department heads were positioning themselves to volunteer for this prestigious assignment. The military contract would be a career-defining opportunity for whoever was chosen to lead it. After the briefing, Henderson called for a brief recess while he spoke privately with Colonel Mitchell. The room buzzed with speculation about who would be selected for the project management role. "Obviously, it should be someone with extensive experience," Tom Bradley said loudly, ensuring everyone could hear. "This isn't a job for someone who's still learning the ropes." His comment was clearly directed at Sarah, and several colleagues nodded in agreement. Despite her proven track record, the perception that she was still an outsider persisted among certain groups. When Henderson and the colonel returned, the announcement came as a surprise to everyone. After discussing our capabilities and personnel, Henderson said, "Colonel Mitchell would like to review the background and qualifications of our department heads individually. He'll be conducting brief interviews this afternoon." Throughout the morning, the colonel met with each potential candidate. The interviews were thorough, covering technical knowledge, management experience, and leadership capabilities under pressure. When Sarah's turn came, she entered Henderson's office feeling a mixture of nervousness and determination. Colonel Mitchell studied her resume carefully before looking up with penetrating eyes. "Ms. Martinez, your performance metrics are impressive," he began. "Tell me about a time when you had to manage a crisis situation with significant consequences for failure." Sarah paused, knowing this was a crucial moment. Most of her colleagues would discuss workplace challenges or production problems. But the colonel's question brought back memories of experiences far more serious than anything she had faced at Henderson Manufacturing. "Colonel, I assume you're looking for examples of leadership under extreme pressure with lives potentially at stake." The colonel's eyebrows raised slightly. That would certainly be relevant to this contract. Sarah took a deep breath and made a decision that would change everything. "Sir, I served as a staff sergeant in the Army from 2018 to 2022. I was deployed to Afghanistan where I led a logistics team responsible for supply deliveries to forward operating bases." The room fell silent. Neither Henderson nor the colonel had known about Sarah's military background, as she had listed her civilian work experience on her employment application. "Continue," the colonel said. his attention now completely focused. In March 2021, our convoy was ambushed while delivering critical medical supplies to a remote outpost. 3 soldiers were wounded, including our lieutenant. I took command of the situation, organized our defense, and coordinated with air support while maintaining protection of the medical supplies that the outpost desperately needed. Sarah's voice remained steady as she recounted the events. We were pinned down for 4 hours. I had to make real-time decisions about resource allocation, personnel positioning, and risk management while under direct enemy fire. The successful completion of that mission saved lives at the outpost and earned my unit a commendation. Colonel Mitchell leaned forward. What specific leadership challenges did you face during that engagement? The biggest challenge was maintaining unit cohesion when our normal command structure was disrupted. I had soldiers who were scared, some who wanted to abandon the mission to get the wounded to safety immediately, and others who wanted to pursue the attackers. I had to balance protecting my people with completing our mission, all while coordinating with multiple outside units for support. How did you resolve these competing priorities? Sarah's military training was evident in her crisp, precise response. I established a clear command structure with specific responsibilities for each soldier. I designated 2 soldiers to provide medical aid while the rest maintained defensive positions. I communicated our situation and needs clearly to command, and I made sure every soldier understood how their individual actions contributed to our overall success. Henderson was staring at Sarah with a completely new expression. In 3 years of working together, she had never mentioned her military service, much less her combat experience. Colonel Mitchell asked several more detailed questions about Sarah's military service, her leadership experience, and her security clearance status. With each answer, it became clear that Sarah possessed exactly the kind of background and experience the colonel was seeking. After the interview, Sarah returned to her office feeling emotionally drained. Talking about her military service always brought back intense memories that she preferred to keep buried. She had deliberately avoided mentioning her Army background when she joined Henderson Manufacturing, wanting to be judged on her civilian qualifications rather than her military service. An hour later, Henderson's secretary called to request Sarah's presence in the conference room immediately. When she arrived, she found Henderson, Colonel Mitchell, and the other officers waiting for her. Ms. Martinez, Colonel Mitchell began formally. After reviewing all candidates, I'm prepared to offer you the position of project manager for this military contract. The announcement hit Sarah like a physical blow. She had hoped to be considered, but she hadn't expected to actually be selected, especially given the ongoing tension with some of her colleagues. However, the colonel continued, I need to address something first. During my background check process, I discovered that you received the Bronze Star Medal for your actions during that convoy ambush you described. Sarah's hand instinctively moved to her chest, where beneath her shirt she wore the medal she had never shown to anyone at work. You significantly understated your military record in our interview, Colonel Mitchell said. According to the official reports, you didn't just organize a defense. You repeatedly exposed yourself to enemy fire to rescue wounded soldiers and protect the medical supplies. Your actions were described as extraordinarily heroic by your commanding officer. Henderson was looking at Sarah with something approaching awe. Sarah, why didn't you ever mention any of this? Sarah felt uncomfortable being the center of attention for her military service. I wanted to succeed here based on my work performance, not because of my background. I didn't think it was relevant to manufacturing automotive parts. Colonel Mitchell smiled for the first time since arriving. Is Martinez. Leadership under extreme pressure is always relevant. The kind of courage and decision-making ability you demonstrated in Afghanistan is exactly what this project requires. The formal announcement was made that afternoon. Sarah Martinez would lead the military contract project, with full authority over resource allocation, personnel assignments, and production scheduling. The news spread through the company like wildfire. The reactions were varied and intense. Some employees, particularly those who had worked closely with Sarah, were proud and excited. Miguel Reyes told anyone who would listen that he had always known Sarah was special, and now he understood why. No wonder she's so calm under pressure, he said. She's dealt with situations most of us can't even imagine. Jenny was practically glowing with pride. I knew there was something different about Sarah, but I had no idea she was a war hero. However, not everyone was pleased with the announcement. Tom Bradley was visibly angry, having expected to be chosen for the prestigious assignment himself. Several of Marcus Webb's former allies also viewed Sarah's selection with resentment. So now we're supposed to be impressed because she was in the army? Pete Collins grumbled to a small group during break time. Plenty of people serve in the military. That doesn't automatically make them good managers. But the criticism was more muted now. The revelation of Sarah's military background and her Bronze Star medal had fundamentally changed how people viewed her. It was one thing to dismiss a young female manager as inexperienced or unqualified. It was quite another to question the competence of someone who had been decorated for heroism in combat. That evening, Sarah worked late, reviewing the specifications for the military contract. The technical requirements were indeed more challenging than anything the company had previously undertaken, but she was confident in her team's abilities. As she prepared to leave, Tom Bradley appeared in her doorway. "Congratulations on your new assignment," he said, though his tone suggested the words tasted bitter in his mouth. "Thank you, Tom. I just want you to know that some of us aren't impressed by military theatrics. This is a business, not a battlefield. I hope you can handle the pressure when the spotlight is really on you." Sarah looked at him calmly. "Tom, I've handled situations where people's lives depended on my decisions. I think I can manage a manufacturing contract." After Tom left, Sarah sat alone in her office, reflecting on the day's events. For 3 years, she had worked to prove herself in an environment where she often felt unwelcome. She had endured mockery, sabotage, and constant questioning of her abilities. Now, in a single day, everything had changed. The same colleagues who had whispered about her being a diversity hire or useless were suddenly looking at her with new respect. The medal she had worn hidden beneath her clothes, a symbol of a moment when her courage had been tested in the most extreme circumstances, had finally been revealed. But Sarah knew this was just the beginning. The military contract would bring new challenges and unprecedented pressure. Some of her colleagues would be watching and waiting for her to fail, hoping to prove that her military record didn't translate to civilian success. As she touched the Bronze Star medal beneath her shirt, Sarah thought about the soldiers she had served with and the moment that had earned her the decoration. She had faced enemy fire and made life-or-death decisions without hesitation. Compared to that experience, managing a manufacturing contract, even a challenging one, seemed entirely achievable. The girl they had called useless was about to show them exactly what she was capable of accomplishing. The military contract project officially launched on a Monday morning in November, and Sarah Martinez faced the biggest professional challenge of her civilian career. The conference room had been converted into a project command center, with detailed timelines, quality specifications, and progress charts covering every wall. Sarah stood before her assembled team, a carefully selected group of the company's best technicians, engineers, and supervisors. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sarah began, her voice carrying the authority that had commanded respect in far more dangerous situations. "This project will test everything we know about precision manufacturing. We have 6 months to deliver sensors that exceed any quality standards we've ever achieved, on a timeline that allows for 0 delays. The team included several employees who had previously questioned Sarah's leadership, including Pete Collins and 2 engineers who had been loyal to Marcus Webb. Sarah had deliberately included them, knowing that the project's success would require the entire company's best talent, regardless of past conflicts. "I know some of you have concerns about this project," Sarah continued, looking directly at Pete Collins. "You're wondering if we can really meet these specifications, if the timeline is realistic, and if our team has the experience for this level of challenge. Those are fair questions, and I'm going to prove the answers through our work, not through speeches." Over the following weeks, Sarah implemented a project management approach that drew on both her manufacturing experience and her military training. She established clear command structures, detailed communication protocols, and backup plans for every potential failure point. "In Afghanistan, we called it redundant mission planning," she explained to her team during one of their daily briefings. "For every critical task, we identified what could go wrong and prepared multiple solutions in advance. We're going to apply the same principle here. The military approach proved remarkably effective in the manufacturing environment. Sarah's team began operating with a precision and coordination that impressed even the most skeptical observers. Daily progress meetings were brief and focused. Problems were identified and solved quickly, and everyone understood their specific responsibilities. Colonel Mitchell made regular visits to monitor the project's progress, and he was consistently impressed with what he found. "Martinez," he told Henderson during one visit, "your project manager is running this operation like a seasoned military commander. Her team's performance metrics are exceptional." But the real test came in the third month of the project when a critical supplier failed to deliver essential components on schedule. The delay threatened to cascade through the entire production timeline, potentially causing the project to miss its crucial military deadline. "The supplier is claiming a manufacturing defect in their facility," Jenny reported during an emergency team meeting. "They're saying it will take at least 3 weeks to resolve the problem and deliver our components." The room fell silent. A 3-week delay would make it impossible to meet the military contract deadline, potentially costing Henderson Manufacturing millions of dollars and destroying their relationship with the Department of Defense. Tom Bradley, who had been monitoring the project closely, seized the opportunity to undermine Sarah. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," he announced during the emergency management meeting. "The project was too ambitious, and now we're facing a crisis that could destroy the company's reputation. What do you suggest we do?" Henderson asked, clearly stressed by the potential disaster. Tom Bradley's answer revealed his true intentions. "I think we need to bring in additional management oversight. This situation requires experience that our current project manager may not possess." Sarah listened to Tom's criticism without responding emotionally, her military training helping her stay focused on solutions rather than politics. When Henderson asked for her assessment, she was ready with a comprehensive response. "Mr. Henderson, we have 3 options," Sarah said calmly. "First, we can accept the supplier's timeline and renegotiate with the military, which would likely result in losing the contract. Second, we can find an alternative supplier, which would require extensive testing and qualification that we don't have time for. Or, third, we can temporarily manufacture the components in-house." Henderson looked skeptical. "Can we actually manufacture those components here? We've never done that type of work before." Sarah had anticipated this question and had spent the previous 24 hours developing a detailed plan. "We can modify our existing equipment to handle the specifications. It will require overtime shifts and additional training for our technicians, but it's achievable. I've already identified which machines can be adapted and which personnel have the necessary skills." "What's the timeline?" Henderson asked. 2 weeks to set up the modified production line, then we can manufacture the components ourselves and still meet our original deadline." Tom Bradley immediately objected. "That's an enormous risk. If the in-house production fails, we'll have wasted 2 weeks and guaranteed our failure. At least with the supplier delay, we might be able to negotiate an extension." Colonel Mitchell, who had been observing the discussion silently, finally spoke up. "Ms. Martinez, you're proposing to essentially create a new manufacturing capability from scratch in 2 weeks." "Yes, sir. We have the technical capability, the personnel, and the equipment. What we need is decisive action and coordinated execution." The colonel studied Sarah intently. "This reminds me of a situation in Afghanistan, where a supply line was cut and a forward base had to become self-sufficient overnight. The officer who solved that problem displayed exactly the kind of innovative thinking and decisive leadership you're showing now." Henderson made the decision to support Sarah's plan, but the pressure was enormous. If the in-house manufacturing effort failed, both Sarah's career and the company's future would be in jeopardy. Sarah threw herself into the implementation with the same intensity she had once applied to military operations. She worked 18-hour days, coordinating equipment modifications, training personnel, and managing the complex logistics of running parallel production lines. Miguel Reyes emerged as one of her strongest allies during this period. "Sarah, I've worked in manufacturing for 15 years, he told her during one late-night shift. "I've never seen anyone organize a complex operation like this. You make it look easy, but I know how incredibly difficult this actually is." Even Pete Collins, who had been one of Sarah's harshest critics, began to appreciate her leadership style. "I hate to admit it," he confided to a colleague, but she knows what she's doing. The way she's coordinated all these moving parts is pretty impressive. The in-house component production line was completed exactly on schedule. The first test runs produced components that not only met the military specifications, but actually exceeded them in several key areas. When Colonel Mitchell inspected the operation, he was amazed by what he found. Ms. Martinez, you've essentially created a new manufacturing capability in 2 weeks. This is the kind of problem-solving ability that made you successful in Afghanistan. The project was completed 1 day ahead of the original deadline, with quality metrics that surpassed every requirement. The sensors not only met military specifications, but established new company records for precision and reliability. When Henderson announced the project's successful completion, the response was overwhelming. The military contract led to additional government orders worth over $10 million. More importantly, the innovations developed during the project improved the quality of all the company's products. At the project completion ceremony, Colonel Mitchell made a special presentation. "I want to publicly recognize the exceptional leadership of Miss Sarah Martinez," he announced to the assembled employees. "Her management of this project represents exactly the kind of excellence that our military depends on." The colonel then did something unexpected. He asked Sarah to step forward and, in front of the entire company, he pinned a Department of Defense civilian commendation to her jacket. "This award recognizes outstanding service to military readiness by civilian personnel," Colonel Mitchell explained. "Miss Martinez has earned this recognition through her exceptional leadership and her commitment to excellence under pressure." The ceremony was a turning point not just for Sarah, but for the entire culture of Henderson Manufacturing. The employees who had once whispered about her being useless or a diversity hire now looked at her with genuine respect and admiration. Tom Bradley's opposition finally crumbled completely. Faced with undeniable evidence of Sarah's capabilities and the tremendous success of her project, he could no longer maintain his undermining campaign. During the ceremony, he approached Sarah with a formal apology. "Sarah, I owe you an acknowledgement," he said, though the words clearly came with difficulty. "I was wrong about your capabilities. Your success with this project speaks for itself." Henderson also recognized that Sarah had become one of his most valuable executives. Within a month of the project's completion, he promoted her to Vice President of Operations, making her responsible for overseeing all manufacturing activities. "Sarah, you've proven that exceptional leadership transcends any single department or project," Henderson told her during the promotion announcement. "I want you to apply the same principles that made the military contract successful to our entire operation." The transformation in workplace culture was remarkable. Sarah's military background, once hidden, became a source of pride for the entire company. New employees were told the story of how their vice president had earned a Bronze Star for heroism in Afghanistan, and then applied the same leadership principles to achieve unprecedented success in manufacturing. Miguel Reyes was promoted to Department Head of Quality Control, a position he earned through his loyal support and exceptional work during the military project. Jenny became Sarah's executive assistant, continuing their strong working relationship. Even more significantly, Sarah's success inspired changes in the company's approach to diversity and inclusion. Henderson realized that his company had been overlooking talented individuals due to biases and assumptions. He implemented new hiring practices and leadership development programs designed to identify and promote the best candidates regardless of their background. 6 months after the military contract's completion, Sarah stood in her new office overlooking the entire production floor. The company was thriving, with record orders and the highest employee satisfaction scores in its history. The hostile whispers and undermining had been replaced by an atmosphere of mutual respect and shared purpose. Jenny knocked on her door with the latest production reports. "Sarah, the numbers for this quarter are incredible. Every department exceeded their targets." Sarah smiled as she reviewed the reports. "It's amazing what people can accomplish when they're treated with respect and given the opportunity to excel." That evening, Sarah attended a company social event, where she was surrounded by employees who had once questioned her presence at Henderson Manufacturing. Now they approached her with genuine warmth and professional admiration. "You know, Pete Collins said during the event, 'I used to think you didn't belong here. I was wrong about a lot of things. You didn't just belong here. You made this place better for everyone.'" As Sarah drove home that night, She reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. The medal beneath her shirt, the bronze star that had remained hidden for so long, was no longer a secret. It had become a symbol of the courage and leadership that she brought to everything she did. The colleagues who had once laughed and called her useless had learned a valuable lesson about the danger of judging others based on assumptions and prejudices. They had discovered that true leadership and excellence can come from unexpected sources, and that the measure of a person's worth is found in their actions under pressure, not in their appearance or background. Sarah's story had become an inspiration throughout the company and beyond. When Colonel Mitchell visited other facilities, he often told the story of the manufacturing executive who had applied military leadership principles to achieve extraordinary civilian success. But for Sarah, the greatest satisfaction came from the knowledge that she had stayed true to her principles throughout the entire ordeal. She had never compromised her integrity, never responded to hostility with hostility, and never allowed the negativity of others to diminish her commitment to excellence. The medal on her chest represented a moment of heroism under fire, but her success at Henderson Manufacturing represented something equally important: the heroism of perseverance, integrity, and leadership in the face of everyday challenges. She had proven that the same courage that serves soldiers in combat can transform civilian organizations and inspire people to achieve more than they ever thought possible. In the end, Sarah Martinez had not just succeeded despite the mockery and opposition she faced, she had transformed an entire company culture and created opportunities for others who might follow in her footsteps. The woman they had called useless had become the leader who showed them all what true usefulness really looked like.